Hello there, you're with CNN News 18. I'm Maha Siddiqui. You're watching a special show, FAQs Flight to America. After over a year of pandemic-related restrictions, America has finally opened up. We witnessed scenes of joyous reunion at various US airports as families that hadn't met in so long were finally together and able to travel hassle-free. Amidst all this, it comes as a huge relief for students as well. India sends close to 2 lakh students to the US. Though the travel for students even during the pandemic continued, but there were many apprehensions and some of those still exist. So let me introduce our 2 guests in the studio who will clear the doubts and ensure that you take that flight to America. Don Heflin, Minister Counselor for Consular Affairs, and Anthony Miranda, he is the Counselor for Cultural and Educational Affairs. Both of them here in the studio with us. Many thanks.
Oh, we're glad to be here. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Maha.
And we'll also be joined by a number of students, professionals and parents on our show today. And both our guests will take their questions as well. Let me turn first to you, Don. So vaccines have made our lives a little easy now in the pandemic. We are reaching a near normal, but just a near normal. So vaccines naturally most important for any travel to the US, and which are the approved ones?
Thanks, Mahat. There was a big change at the beginning of November. The first one is that Covaxin got emergency use approval by the World Health Organization. Great. And the other was that on November 8th, we changed our rules. The way you go to the U.S. now, once you get a visa, is you have to be vaccinated. You have to have full vaccination, 2 jabs plus 2 weeks, with one of the WHO-approved or U.S.-approved vaccines, which means Covishield and Covaxin count.
All right, that's great. So most of the people who have those vaccines will be able to travel hassle-free now with just a certificate. I understand that that's what they'll require to show at the immigration, right,
Correct.
Don? All right. So let's quickly go to our guests, the students who are joining us, because they're very eager to ask their questions. We're opening them up here right on the big screen so you can address them directly. Let's go to our first speaker here. Aritri Bhattacharya is joining us from Kolkata with her question. Aritri, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Well, I have 1 or 2 questions here. Firstly, of course, being the vaccine, that is whether Covishield or Covaxin, which one would be acceptable whenever a student is traveling to US. Second would be what kind of questions a student usually needs to face whenever it's a visa interview, and if at all a question comes up which he or she is unable to answer, so how then we should face that.
Don, you want to take that?
All right, 2 great questions. First, both Covishield and Covaxin are acceptable. All right, second question. What kind of questions did you expect in the interview? What we tell the students, and students did a very good job with this past summer, is we want to hear from you why you think that this university and this program makes sense for you. And I want you to think about the night you and your parents decided that this is where you were going to go. What did you say to them? What did they say to you? Why does this town and this university and this program make sense to you? And you know what? Part of it's academics. This program's great. It's a leading program in its field. That's why I want to go there. But we also understand, particularly with undergraduates, 18 years old, the family may have made a decision that you want to be at a smaller school in a smaller city. Or maybe you had your choice between 3 programs, but one of them's very close to where your uncle and auntie live, and you like that support network. That's great. Tell us that.
Anthony, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I think that the points that Don was making are really great. You know, what's amazing about, U.S. schools is that we've got 4,000 accredited U.S. universities and colleges throughout the United States. And to Don's point about, that conversation that you have with your parents about which school you're going to select, you've got so many opportunities and options for you that you can really find the perfect fit for you.
Aritri, I hope that answered your questions over there. Let me go across to the next student. Rudranil Sinha is joining us from Delhi. Rudranil, go ahead.
Yes, hi. I had 2 questions. One, what is the typical timeline for the visa application of international undergraduate students? And are there any delays in the visa approval process that stretch beyond the start of the fall term? And in case there are, what should a student do?
Good. 2 good questions. How long does it take? Well, to be ready to apply for a visa, you have to have already gotten accepted by a university and been issued an I-20 form by them. And then you go online and you seek an appointment. We are trying to make a lot of appointments available in December, and we'll do the same thing again next summertime. From the time you ask for an appointment till the time you actually come in and interview with us, maybe a few weeks, maybe a month. That's about the most it would be. Now, what happens if you're delayed? We found the universities are pretty open-minded about letting you show up at least a few days late. I know when you're young and you're worried about things, you say, oh my God, it says I have to be there by January 2nd. I have to be there by January 2nd. But if you got a late appointment or for some other reason didn't quite have it together to get there by the 2nd, and you ask them nicely, they'll issue a letter saying you can be there a few days late. But we got the vast majority of our students interviewed and most of them issued by August 15th this year for a start September 1st or later.
I think that was a very important question, Don, because a lot of students tend to panic if the date is coming very close to the time they have to fly out. Have there been changes, Don and Anthony, both of you, because of the pandemic, because of the manner in which interviews for visas are conducted?
Oh yeah, that's really a great question. Part of the reason that categories aside from students have a bit of a wait time now is we're really taking social distancing into consideration. Social distancing both at our visa applicant center where you go to have some fingerprints done and be screened in other ways, and then actually at the consulate itself. So I can tell you when you show up at either one of those places, you're going to be 6 feet apart from other people the whole time. And there's a liberal use of hand sanitizer. We're making it as safe as we can possibly make it. That's part of the reason we can't really go back to doing the volumes of people we did 2, 3, 4 years ago yet. We're going to have to wait until the scientists tell us it's okay.
And a linked question for you, Anthony. How are the US campuses coping with the COVID situation? Because now that students are going to the campus, there in person, what are the plans in place in case students fall sick, even though they are doubly vaccinated?
It's such a great question, Maha. And of course, U.S. universities and colleges are very concerned, appropriately so, with the welfare of their students, whether that's an American student or an international student. And so the colleges and universities, of course, are following the guidelines based on the city or the state where they happen to be located. Some of those guidelines might include mask wearing on campuses, whether it's outside or indoors in the classrooms. A lot of universities are also requiring, of course, all students to be vaccinated, save some certain exceptions. And so, students can actually feel, for the most part, quite comfortable in the sense that they are within a community of vaccinated people.
That's something that is going to comfort even the parents.
Absolutely.
Because they'll be concerned about their wards who are going abroad to America. Let's take a few more questions from the students who are joining us on the show. Arnachalam P is joining us from Chennai. Arnachalam, go ahead.
So my question is, how does one maintain a valid F1 visa during the course of study? And what are some do's and don'ts while studying abroad?
Okay, great question. I'll take the first part of it, and Anthony will do the second. What happens when you go to the U.S., from the time that you get your I-20 and then interview with us and then are admitted at the port of entry and show up at the school, you're in a system called SEVIS. And the SEVIS tracks your progress, and it makes sure that you stay enrolled full-time at a university. It records any changes you make in terms of which college you go to or what your field of concentration, we call them majors, are. And you need to make sure, working with your international student advisor at the university, each semester you're up to date in the SEVIS system, and then you won't have any problems with immigration. But as to the question of what some do's and don'ts are for students, Anthony?
Sure, Don, thanks. Do's and don'ts, it's such a great question. And in some ways, the do's and don'ts for an international student are going to be the same as for an American student. We want you guys to take full advantage of your educational experience in the United States. So some of the do's, of course, are make sure you go to all your classes, make sure you make friends, make sure you go to your professor's office hours so that you can get to know her, him better. Join a club, expand your horizons. Those are the kind of things you want to sort of squeeze all of the juice out of that educational experience that you can. Some of the don'ts, of course, are going to be the same don'ts that you should be following now. You're going to want to follow the rules of the university in terms of plagiarism. You're going to want to make sure that you're following the local laws, things like that.
All right. I'll take a quick question because, Anthony, you were talking about how parents should rest assured that the students are in a community largely of vaccinated people in the campus, on the campus rather. Here in India, the under 18 vaccination is yet to start. Some of those who could be applying for a prospective visa for an undergraduate course could be less than 18. In that case, how does the visa process happen?
I double-checked this rule just before we came here, Maha. If you're under 17 when you enter the U.S., we understand that that's too young for you to get vaccinated in India.
Yes.
And because of that, you fall into a kind of a broad exception to the vaccine requirement, but you do have to do a PCR test just before you travel. Everybody has to do one within 3 days of travel. In the case of somebody like that, it's 1 day of travel. And then you'll have some quarantine requirements when you first get to America. So it can be done, you just need to plan ahead.
All right. Okay, so let's go back to the students and their questions. I think they're more relevant than our questions over here since we are not students anymore. Harsh Savla wants to ask a quick question there. Harsh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering about the what factors decide either the approval or disapproval of a visa?
Okay, we really want to see that the program of study and the school makes sense for you. And that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of people. A lot of people want to go to the U.S. and major in the hard sciences or mathematics. Others want to do something more business orientated. Others want to study the liberal arts. Some people choose big, very prestigious schools because they think that'll really give them a boost in their career. Other people like to go to smaller schools because they think it's a better environment for them and that they'll probably go to graduate school afterwards. Those are all, we just want to hear why you chose what you chose. Why you chose the school you did and the program you did, and sometimes the city where you're going to wind up. And there aren't really any wrong answers there. The wrong answer is when you can't articulate that, when you don't really know the answer to that, or when you just repeat what a recruiter or an agent or a school official told you. We get a lot of applicants who come in and just spit out the same story about the school as the last person who was going to the same school. They memorized something. Don't do that. Think about when you sat around the kitchen table with your parents and you told them why you wanted to go do what you wanted to do. And look, I've got a lot of Indian friends. I know it may have been the other way around. Your father and mother may have told you where you're going and why you're going there. Great, just tell us that.
All right. Prachi Singla is also with us. She's joining us from Noida. Prachi, go ahead with your question.
All right. So my first question was that could you please let us know what possible impact could be there on an international student as an applicant in case the COVID pandemic continues, especially in the United States of America?
Oh, I'm going to take the first part of it and then Anthony can take the second part. I forgot to say something when we were talking about the 17-year-olds. If I was a 17-year-old, the very first thing I would do, and the college is probably going to strongly recommend or require this, is you go down and start your vaccination. But Anthony, could you give a picture of, what the campuses are like during COVID and the kind of precautions they're taking?
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a great question. And, it's funny, my nephew actually just started college in the fall, and those are the same kind of questions that I had, and certainly my sister had as the mom. Campuses want to keep students safe. That's their priority, right? Certainly we're looking at, the COVID numbers in the United States. And of course, there are going to be occasionally hot pockets where, a COVID numbers start to rise. But again, because a lot of the universities are actually requiring that students be vaccinated, that's one measure of safety. The second measure of safety, of course, is all the precautions that universities are taking, including still requiring to wear masks. Again, it's going to vary depending on the university and where that university is located. And third, all of these universities and colleges have a plan in place for when there are those occasional breakthrough cases. And we know that that's going to happen. The science says it's going to happen, right? We know that if a vaccine is 90% effective, that simple math tells us then that there are going to be breakthrough cases. And so, there are going to be instances where maybe a student tests positive for COVID despite being vaccinated, and that student will go into quarantine for a period of time. Schools are going to want to make sure that that student can still access his classes, etc. Maybe do that, in a hybrid model for the period of 10 days or so when the student is in quarantine, and then they'll return to the campus just like before.
And Dawn, when you mentioned that those under 18 who are in America from India who haven't got their vaccines here in India can access vaccines in America, are there any documentary requirements for them?
No, they're widely available in America.
All right.
They're quite easy to get now.
So you just have to pay for the vaccine and get a shot for yourself.
It
right?
might even be free for you.
Oh, all right, for the students.
And this is something also, Maha, that the universities themselves, of course, are very interested in ensuring as well and helping facilitate that for international students. So again, we're talking about a small subset, those who might be, arriving in the United States if they're under 18, but still, even before, all this summer, before we had the requirement to be vaccinated, and students may have been showing up who were not vaccinated, the colleges and universities were ensuring that they could get access to a vaccine.
Anthony, have we seen any dip in the number of students going from India to America for studies, especially over the last 1 year when the pandemic has been raging?
No, it's a great question. In fact, just yesterday, there was the release of a report that looks just at that very issue. It's called the Open Doors Report, and it did reflect an overall decrease in the number of international students pursuing higher education in the United States, about a 15% overall decrease. For India, that decrease was a little bit less, at about 13%. But actually, we've already seen, or we're seeing evidence that that number is already starting to tick up. Dawn, I don't know if you want to talk about sort of the great work that your team did over the summer.
Sure. Some of you may have seen our Facebook Live about 6 months ago. We committed to interviewing as many people this past summer as we did in the summer 2019, the last summer before COVID. We actually exceeded that a bit, but we wound up issuing the highest number of student visas ever for India, 62,000. So the Open Doors report that Anthony refers to talks about how many students are in the U.S., and that got affected by the 2020 year when India was locked down and we couldn't interview anyone. Happened in other countries too. But 2021 was a strong comeback, and it looks like this winter season is going to be a strong comeback also.
What about students who would at some stage require a booster shot maybe? I mean, there's no clarity on that as of now, but they may have got a shot in India and then at some stage they'll require a booster shot as well.
You've really asked a good question. I mean, the one thing I don't know because I'm not a scientist, is what the scientists will think about taking a Pfizer or Moderna booster shot on top of Covaxin or Covishield.
Yes.
And were I a student going to the U.S., I'd ask that question of the health professionals at the campus. Our college campuses often have hospitals attached to them. Even the smaller ones have a good clinic attached to them. Go ask that question and see what the plan's going to be. I expect more and more science will be coming out on that.
All right. We've spoken about students, their issues, visa-related problems that students have faced. What about tourists? If parents, for instance, want to accompany their ward to America, how do they get their visas? Is it more flexible now since many of the parents would have both their vaccinations in place?
I was briefly the least popular man in India this summer when I had to announce that we weren't going to allow parents to go. It's going to be different this spring and this summer, fall. If a parent already has a visa and they can get their vaccinations in time to go, they're welcome to go and take their child. If they have a visa that's expired in the last few years, there's a decent chance that they'll be able to get a Dropbox appointment and renew their visa and accompany their child. I think parents who have never had a B1, B2 tourist visa probably aren't going to have much luck.
Okay. And general tourist visas, that we are still not seeing?
It's going to be a similar pattern. In January, we're going to open up a lot of appointments, but it won't be enough to keep up with demand. We're going to concentrate on the Dropbox cases. They're easier. We can do more of them in a day. People who have never had a tourist visa before are probably going to have a long, long wait. And even the Dropbox cases will have a bit of a wait.
But it will be a case-by-case basis, I'm guessing. If there is an emergency, of course, as the U.S. Embassy has been facilitating visas.
We are always happy to receive an emergency visa request. And listen, if you're one of the parents who doesn't have a visa to go accompany your child, if your child has a true emergency, just contact us.
We have one more question. Rishabh Patil is joining us from Mumbai. Rishabh, go ahead with your question.
Hi, my question was that does the number of university admits actually affect whether your visa is going to get rejected or accepted?
No, it doesn't affect it. In fact, I'm a good example. Anthony probably is too. I applied to at least half a dozen universities before I found the one that was right for me. When we interview, we won't really know that. It could be the vice consul ask you, did you focus in on this school, or is this one of several schools you looked at? But at the end of the day, somebody who looks around at several schools and picks the one that makes the most sense for them, it's exactly what we're looking for.
And in fact, as you're applying to schools, you should be using some sort of methodology where maybe a school is going to be a reach for you, is going to be maybe difficult for you to get into, maybe based on your qualifications, your grades, etc. Maybe a school is going to be easier for you to get into. So if you're applying in a right sort of mixture of schools, you're bound to get, you're bound not to get admitted to certain schools, and you're bound to get admitted to some as well.
What about, safety from COVID when students are staying together? I mean, they're not just studying in classes, they're going back to their hostels, to their rooms. Some of them could be sharing rooms. Is that, how is that being managed? That's pretty difficult to do, right?
It is difficult, but this again goes back to the point about why universities, for the most part, have found it so crucial to insist that students arrive vaccinated. Because of course, you're absolutely right. In fact, my nephew is just started college in the fall, and he's sharing a room. And so, in the actual room, and this is just one university. Of course, each university is going to have its own policies. But in the room, students might not be required to wear their masks, but in the hallways or in the classrooms, absolutely. All of these measures are designed to reduce risk.
Also, the dining area. How is that being managed?
As try as I have never been able to eat food with a mask on. So of course, they have to take off their masks at the dining hall as well. But that's where also the social distancing comes into place, making sure that we don't have too many students crowding around one table so that people are spread out.
And, the parents would also want to know, in case, as you were pointing out, there are breakthrough cases and some student goes into quarantine. How do you continue to get a health update of your child? Are those measures in place on campuses?
Absolutely, absolutely they are. So, of course, universities have to have plans in place on the odd chance that there is a breakthrough case. And so, they will have arrangements either with hotel facilities or with another building on campus that may be vacant, so that students who on the odd chance do come down with COVID can quarantine safely. And of course, since the university is going to want to ensure that those students remain healthy during this period of COVID infection, that they have a plan in place to do so. Fortunately, of course, the best place to get updates about your kid's health is just going to be getting on to a Zoom call or, chatting with your folks back at home so that you can update them regularly on how you're doing.
That's the way we've all survived through the pandemic, getting updates of our family during lockdown as well via these virtual calls. I think we're running out of time, but we have perhaps just one more caller and query that we'll take up. Durga is calling us in. She's a parent and she has some query as well. Durga, go ahead.
Yeah. So what are the opportunities a student can explore in universities, sir?
The opportunities, oh my gosh, there's so many, I don't even know if I could probably list them. I mean, one of the great things about studying in the US is just that there is, world-class education, world-class facilities. Universities are trying to create an educational atmosphere where there is diversity of thought. And that's why having, students from India or having students all around the world contribute so meaningfully to the educational experience in the United States. Of course, we're focused on the amazing qualifications of the professors, but a lot of that learning happens from your peers, from your students as well. There's tons of extracurricular activities that you can also do. Whether it's joining an improv troupe, maybe you want to join an a cappella music group, maybe you want to learn how to, rock climb and boulder. There's so many different niche activities, and so really it's about discovering your passion.
You know, we have completely run out of time. I know there are lots of questions that students have. Many students were linked up with us, but that's all that we have time for today. We hope that helped clear the doubts of many wanting to travel at this juncture to America. With that, let me thank both our guests for their patient hearing today. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you,
That's
Maha.
it then. Many thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.